Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, and today we're going to talk about UFC Louisville. Jared Cannonier versus Nassourdine Imavov, and it's going down this Saturday night live at the KFC Yum Center in Louisville, Kentucky. You got two top 10 middleweights trying to get right back in the heat. You know, Jared Cannonier does have a win over Sean Strickland, trying to extend the winning streak, and same thing for Nassourdine Imavov in terms of the winning streak, not in terms of having a win over Sean Strickland. In fact, I felt like Nassourdine Imavov, after his fight with Sean Strickland, he seems to have turned a corner. So really pivotal main event for the middleweight division. So without further ado,
let's get down to business. Give you one more night to get this. We've had a million nights just like this. So let's get down to business.
Main event of the evening in the middleweight division, we got Jared Cannonier. He's 17-6, taking on Nassourdine Imavov, who's 13-4. Currently, they got it Nassourdine -125. The comeback on Jared Cannonier is +105. Hell of a fight. Firstly, you got to give a lot of credit to Jared Cannonier. His last fight, he goes out there against Marvin Vettori, and he attempts over 420 strikes. He lands over 240, significant. Like, goddamn, dude. Like, people talk about his age, you know, he's 40 years old. To put up numbers like that, you definitely take note. Now, he is coming off an MCL injury, but a guy like that, you know, I wouldn't really read too much into it. I think that, you know, he's probably doing things the right way. So it's more so about the dynamic of the matchup. You got a guy in Nassourdine who's a lot younger, and I really do feel like he's turned a corner since that Sean Strickland fight. It seems like he took that fight to heart, and ever since then, what he did against Chris Curtis and Romando Lidze, it was like, oh, okay, so this kid can definitely be a contender. And he kind of does have a bit of that Cyril Gane karate-ish style, but he's super athletic. It takes a lot of energy to have that style. And the thing about it is, you've kind of seen in Cannonier's a couple of his last few fights, like early on, like in the Brunson fight, even early on in the Vettori fight, he's kind of a slow starter. And that's where I kind of think that Nassourdine is going to kind of frustrate him a little bit with the speed early on. But what I'm worried about is, like I said, Nassourdine's style takes a lot of energy, and you start to gas out against a guy like the Killer Gorilla, Jared Cannonier, and he will absolutely put it on you. And he's ready to go 5 hard. I mean, he's a guy that matched Strickland on his output throughout a 5-round duration, even won the decision, which is very hard to do. And then, like I said, that Vettori fight, he just took things to a whole nother level. So this is a really tough fight to call. I can definitely see Nassourdine banking some early rounds. It's just, is his cardio going to hold up? Again, it's not the guy's not in shape. The guy's in fantastic shape. It's that style requires a lot of energy. So that's where I'd kind of be worried. You know, a 3rd, 4th, 5th round, if Cannonier can possibly start to take over and put some damage on him. Cannonier's so physical. He's got nasty kicks. Obviously, you know about his punches too. And he's so experienced. He's a young 40-year-old. And let me read the reaches real quick. So, you know, Nassourdine's 6'3", Jared's only 5'11", but Jared's the one with the 77-inch reach. Nassourdine's got a 75-inch reach. So this is a super tough fight to call. I think Nassourdine has slightly better defense, but the thing about it is slightly better defense when he's fresh. What's he going to look like when he starts getting a little tired? Because Jared is durable as all hell. Dude's named Jared, can take a shot. Let's just leave it at that, right? So this is a tough one. I'm leaning a little bit towards Nassourdine, just a little bit, but, you know, this is one where you can realistically see it going either way, and it's just more so of where they're both at in their respective careers. Like I said, Jared's 40, but he's coming off a career best in terms of his output. Like what he did against Vettori, and if he's looking to build off that and come out here with nonstop output, he absolutely has a path to victory. And Nassourdine has got to take advantage of Jared kind of getting off to these slow starts. Nassourdine's got to come out there, like I said, frustrate him with that speed, with that movement, give him things that he's not used to seeing. So, yeah, it's a tough one. I wish I really had a convicted pick, but I don't. I'm going to lean towards Nassourdine, but it could go either way. It's a very tough fight to call. Co-main event of the evening in the light heavyweight division, we got Dominick Reyes. He's 12-4, taking on Dustin Jacoby, who's 19-8. Currently, they got it Dustin Jacoby -230. The comeback on Dominick Reyes is +195. So I bet you're going to hear a lot of, oh, y'all must have forgot about Dominick Reyes. But the thing about Reyes is when he was doing his thing, it was just at that point where like light heavyweights started to be the same size as John Jones. Because you remember when John Jones was ruling, he had like fucking 10-inch reach advantages on everyone, 5-inch height advantages, and all these things. And it wasn't until like that first Gustafsson fight, the Reyes fight, where like dudes could finally kind of match him on size and athleticism. But the issue with Reyes was he literally gave everything he had in that Jones fight, and he never had anything ever again. It's kind of crazy. That happens sometimes, and you hear all his interviews on every single fight week. He's getting ready to fight Jan Blachowicz. All he talks about is John Jones. He's getting ready to fight Yuri. All he talks about is John Jones. He's getting ready to fight Span. All he talks about is John Jones. I really think that loss to Jones just took everything mentally out of Reyes. And then the last 3 fights, when the mental was gone, now these guys have capitalized and taken away the physical because the chin is gone now too. And you could say, yeah, Jan Blachowicz, Yuri, and Span, they're all heavy hitters. Absolutely, they are all heavy hitters. But like, come on, man, those knockouts. Like, let's not even talk about the Jan fight. Let's talk about the Yuri fight. When you get face planted like that, you're probably never going to come back the same. And he didn't. I mean, in that Span fight, he got knocked out with a jab, and he got rocked like 10 seconds into that fight. It just doesn't seem like the same guy. Like, again, he's big, he's athletic, he's got skills, and he's at his best. He was a good kind of point fighter. But the thing about Jacoby is Jacoby can point fight too, and Jacoby can still knock people out. Like when people criticize Jacoby's last few fights, it kind of say that he's on the decline or whatnot. Like, let's really examine those last few fights. The Khalil fight, a lot of people thought that Jacoby might have won that Khalil fight. The Mirzakhanov fight. Listen, Mirzakhanov's a problem, man. So, give that to Mirzakhanov fair and square. I think Mirzakhanov, he might look kind of unassuming, but that's a bad dude right there. And then the Menafield fight, Jacoby was winning that fight. And then he started to kind of coast a little bit and got caught late into the fight. So even though Jacoby might, be closer to the end than he is to the beginning, I still think he's got something left. And he is fighting competitive with real guys. And with someone in Reyes who's trying to find himself, who his confidence has to be down in the dumps. I mean, we can talk about his chin being out the window too, but it's really about the confidence, because I've seen guys come back, from being knocked out multiple times, but they have to still believe in themselves. And I'm not convinced that Reyes has any belief in himself whatsoever. So I think Jacoby actually comes out here and knocks him out, and it's going to be a sad. Man, it's just crazy. The sport can take everything out of you. One day you're top of the mountain, arguably beat John Jones. The next day you're coming off 3 brutal knockout losses in a row. It's just crazy how the sport works. And it speaks volumes to how much the mental is such a big aspect of this game. And yeah, if you hear Dom Reyes on Fight Week talking about John Jones, go send Dustin Jacoby. But let's see what happens. But I'm gonna go Jacoby here. Now, next up, featured bout in the Bantamweight division. We got Raul Rosas Jr. He's 8-1, taking on Ricky Tercios, who's 12-3. Currently, they got it Raul -215. The comeback on Ricky is +185. So it's interesting because Raul, he is the prospect, and he's taking on an experienced vet in Ricky Tercios. And Ricky's seen and done things that, Raul hasn't at this point. You know what I mean? He's been there with real guys, win, lose, or draw, has UFC experience and this and that. But the thing about it is you have to give Ricky his credit for paying your dues and for being around the game a long time. And he is a grown-ass man, 31 years old. So that grown man strength and that experience has to count for something. But then you look at his fights, and most of them that he wins are like split decisions against guys that you'd think he'd be, you'd think he'd have a leg over, guys that you'd think he'd be able to separate himself against. And then you see that Ayman Zahabi fight, and like, for all the credit I want to give this guy for being experienced and paying his dues, you just can't, forgive performances like that. But then with Raul, he's very physical. He's big for the weight class. And he had to pay his dues too in that Christian Rodriguez fight. Christian is a fucking problem, man. Christian is serious. And, Raul took that first round, and then Christian kind of vet lessoned him a little bit. But it's been a while since then. So again, Raul's style does take a lot of energy to try to take those back takes. Like, even if you see someone at the highest level of that style, like Aljamain Sterling, even he has cardio issues late in fights. Again, not because he's in shape. Look at the shape Aljamain's in. It's because that style requires a lot of energy. So it's about, can Ricky just make him work and then take over late? That's Ricky's path to victory. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I'm going to lean towards Rahul because I do think he's going to have early dominance, but is it going to surprise you if he pulls like a young stunt late into the fight after dominating early? Not going to surprise me, but I'm still going to go with Rahul here. I think he gets past this one. Next up in the middleweight division, we got Bruno the Hulk Ferreira. He's 11-1, taking on Dustin Stoltzfus, who's 15-5. Currently, they got it. Bruno Ferreira minus 275. The comeback on Dustin Stoltzfus is plus 220. This is a tough one to call because I don't think that Bruno Ferreira is the guy that people think he is. Now, don't get me wrong. When I say that, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this guy has what? 11 wins, and all 11 of them are finishes, and all but one are in the first round. You know what I'm saying? 8 knockouts, 3 submissions. But man, he's small for the weight class. You know, he's listed at 5'10". This dude ain't no 5'10". This dude's 5'8". And, you know, I got love for my fellow 5'8ers, but like guys that height should be fighting in lower weight classes, not at middleweight. Like one of these days, he's going to get a reality check. I mean, he kind of did in that Nursultan fight, but I'm just saying, like, you can't be 5'8" at middleweight long term. You just can't, dude. And like the thing with Stoltzfus, early on, if you take the dog shot on Stoltzfus, I mean, this guy stands straight up in the air, doesn't move his head off the center line. He's not the most athletic. He's going to get hit with some big shots early on. He might even get knocked out early on. But if Stoltzfus can drag this out, like Stoltzfus has a nice body lock takedown. He's good when he takes the back. He's experienced. He's been paying his dues. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. And I still feel like we haven't seen the best from Stoltzfus yet. I still feel like there's some untapped potential there, but he has to get past the early going with Bruno Ferreira here. I mean, like you watch that Stoltzfus and Puna Haley fight, and we'll talk about Puna here in a little bit, but like some of those counters he was getting caught with, I was like, oh my God, how did this guy not go down yet? And with Bruno, what I don't like is where his height kind of hinders him in this weight class is in the in-betweens. He just looks very uncomfortable standing. Like he'll swing his bombs, and if he can land, they're powerful. But like I said, the in-betweens, there's not really jab, there's not really calf kicks. It's kind of awkward how he moves. And someone, like I said, someone else is going to make this guy pay too. So I think it's a dog or pass situation. Look, of course, there's a chance Bruno just comes out here and starches Stoltzfus. But I'm telling you, if Stoltzfus can get you to that 7-minute mark, I think he might be a live dog. It's just very contingent. Because again, this guy is not athletic, stands straight up in the air, chin up. He gets caught a lot early, but I'm hoping that Puna fight gave him some confidence, let him know that, hey, you do belong, and you can parlay that into, you know, a winnable fight here, but you're going to have to go through some early adversity. And that's understood because Bruno, they call him the Hulk for a reason, but I just can't get past Bruno's size for the weight class, especially at a price almost minus 300. Fuck that, dude. It's dog or pass. If you take the dog, you hope that he doesn't get embarrassed early and get me to the 7-minute mark. And I think he's got a chance. So I'm going to go Dustin Stoltzfus here. Now, also in the middleweight division, we got a matchup between Julian Marquez. He's 9-4, taking on Zach Reese, who's 6-1. Currently, they got it. Julian Marquez minus 135. The comeback on Zach Reese is plus 115. This is another interesting one because Julian Marquez, like we know exactly what he is. He's just kind of like a tough man brawler for the middleweight division. That's pretty much the extent. He's insanely durable. He's good at kind of getting comebacks, and like he's good at swinging bombs. He's an exciting fighter. I like watching him fight. But I really do think that there was a long break between the DQ Rico fight in 2018 and the Maki Patola fight in 2021. I'm not sure if he had like an injury or what. I'm sure he had an injury. That must be it. And he's just come back in that Maki Pitolo fight, the Sam Alvey fight, the Uhobo Cop fight, and the Marc Andre fight. He just hasn't looked the same. Now, granted, these are, you know, Robocop and Marc Andre. That's a completely different level than Reese. Here's what we know about Reese. He's 6'4" with a 77-inch reach. So kind of like we were talking about with Bruno Ferreira, who's like 5'8" with a 72-inch reach, who's too small for middleweight. This dude, Zach Reese, is a big middleweight. But the thing about him is, and firstly, if one of y'all can find that amateur fight he had with Kevin Holland, please send it my way, because that's like the only time he's been past the first round ever, even though it was an amateur fight. Like, we don't talk about amateurs, but like, you know, it's like we ain't talking about practice. I know we ain't talking about practice like my boy Iverson, but I'm just saying I wouldn't mind watching that if one of y'all got the footage. But look at this guy's pro run. So he gets fed a bunch of cans, and I mean absolute cans. Like a dude that was 1-0, 0-1, 0-0, 6-3, 5-10. These are the guys he fought before the UFC. He finishes them all in the first round, which is how you're supposed to handle those cans. So, hey, Zach, you clearly showed you're a level above these guys. You treated them accordingly. So let's give you a step up in competition. The step up in competition was this guy, Eli Aranov, who, you know, you know, when you're getting arm bars off your back at middleweight, like let alone in a contender series fight or UFC, that kind of stuff is not gonna fly at the highest level, man. And you saw when he fought Cody Brundage, that was a fraud check. What were the odds on that? He was like a minus 225 favorite because you see Cody Brundage lose to real guys, to Malkoon. They call that a win. That was not a win. And to other real guys. But when you're competing with real guys and now you're competing with someone who's fought the peanut vendor and the slushy vendor, it's hard to really gauge. So, yes, does Zach Reese have an opportunity here? Yeah, you're fighting a guy in Julian Marquez who's looked terrible since he's come back, but he's looked terrible against real guys and he's experienced. So it's like if you're taking Zach Reese here, you're kind of throwing a dart. You're kind of putting the blindfold on and you're hoping you hit a bullseye because you don't know shit about him. You could be, maybe the first fight, hey, just had to get fraud checked a little bit, but now we get back to reality and you start starching people again. Or maybe you see that this guy got into the UFC way too soon. He hadn't paid his dues yet. He wasn't ready. He hadn't even seen the second round at a pro level yet. So, yeah, I just have to go with Julian Marquez based off the experience. He's been there. He's done that. But is it going to surprise me if a 6'4" guy with a 77-inch reach comes out here and starches Marquez? No, it's not going to surprise me. But I think if Marquez can drag this guy and kind of, show those vet tactics and that experience, he should be able to get past this one. But it's hard for me to get excited about laying chalk on someone that's on their way out. Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Puna Soriano. He's 9-4, taking on Miguel Baeza, who's 10-3 currently. They got it. Miguel Baeza minus 190. The comeback on Puna is plus 165. Interesting fight because clearly Miguel's the better fighter here. I mean, he's got a nasty jab, big calf kicks, black belt in jiu-jitsu. It seemed like this guy was a really bright prospect who was on his way to the rankings, and that Santiago Ponzinibbio fight took a lot out of him. It almost seemed like a Dominick Reyes situation, like where he was right there, but just that war, like he just hasn't come back the same. And there's no shame in getting knocked out by Chaos Williams. Honestly, there's no shame in getting knocked out by Fialho. I know Fialho's on a knockout loss streak, but like Fialho can crack, but it's just, you'd expect Miguel Baeza to perform better in those spots, and you have to wonder where's his confidence and where's his chin at, man. He does stand straight up in the air. And one thing about Puna's not the most technical. Puna actually has a wrestling background and never uses it. The times he uses it is actually defensively. Like in that Maximov fight, I was pretty damn impressed with Puna's like flexibility and like he was like fucking doing like a full ass split when he was defending those takedowns. That was pretty cool. But the thing with Puna you got to worry about is he can wing them, man. Like you watch that Stoltzfus fight and some of those counters he was hitting on Stoltzfus, I was shocked Stoltzfus did not go down. I was like, damn, this dude's got a chin on him, And it's like Miguel is going to pick apart Puna. It's just, is Miguel going to pick apart Puna until he gets his arm raised, or is Miguel going to pick apart Puna until he gets knocked what out? So that's what you have to determine with this fight. I'm going to lean with Miguel because I do think he's the better talent and the better fighter. But let me remind you all, the better fighter does not always win. And Puna absolutely has the power to knock out a guy like Miguel, especially if Miguel's questioning himself and he's not fully feeling it anymore. Hey, then it could be an upset. But Miguel, like technically speaking, could make this guy look foolish. It's just, can we like tuck our chin? Can we keep our hands up? Can we move our head just a little bit, Miguel? I'm going to lean with Miguel. Let's see what happens. Don't go crazy, because you don't want to bet on guys with so many question marks, especially at a price like this. So it's a pass. Now, this next one I'm very intrigued by. Next up in the lightweight division, we got a matchup between Thiago Moises. He's 8-7, taking on Ludovic Klein, who's 21-4. Currently, they got it. Ludovic Klein minus 130. The comeback on Thiago Moises is plus 110. All right. So Thiago Moises, at this point, I would consider him to be like a young veteran. You know what I'm saying? Like he's still only 29 years old, not even 30, but like when you talk about paying your dues, when you talk about getting thrown into the deep end, like, dude, I got so much respect for Moises. Like, when you make your UFC debut against Beneil Dariush, you know what I'm saying? Then you're fighting a seasoned vet like Holloway. Then Demir Ismagulov. And I'm talking about Demir pre the illness or whatever, like back when Demir was Demir. Then you're fighting Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, Hernandez, Islam Makhachev, Joel, Christos Giagos. Like, he hasn't gotten a step down until that Melquizael Costa guy. Then he fought Benoit Saint-Denis. Then he got his other step down against Mitch Ramirez. Like, basically, the only dudes that have been beating Thiago Moises in the UFC are guys that either went on to be ranked or were ranked at the time. Like, so he only loses to legit competition. And the thing with Ludovic Klein, so like, you've seen the glimpses here and there. Like, you saw glimpses in that Shane Young fight. You saw glimpses in that Mason Jones fight that, like, hey, if this dude puts it together, he could be a problem. He's super athletic. Like, for a guy that's only 5'7", he's got a nasty high kick, and he's starting to pay his dues. If he starts to feel like this is his home, look out. He could be a future top 15 guy. Like, that Ignacio Bahamondes fight was such a big step in the right direction, and he really started to look like a seasoned vet with a complete game in that fight. And then the Cunningham fight, I get it. Cunningham punching bag on a week notice. He treated him like a punching bag on a week notice. So I'm very impressed with what I've seen. And not to mention the physique transformation from Ludovic Klein. Like, the guy was always ripped, but like, these last few fights, this guy has been harvesting the garden of life fruits and vegetables in a way where, like, oh my God, like, I don't want to step in this guy's way right now. He's breathing fire like a fucking dragon. So I don't want to get in this guy's way right now. But Thiago Moises is going to give him a formidable challenge. My issue with Moises has kind of been like, so he's so skilled that, like, if you're not on his level skill wise, he's going to outclass you. He's going to submit you. He's going to do all these things to you. But if you can match him with intensity, Thiago can break in fights, but you have to be on a certain level to break him. And speaking of breaking, we've seen Ludovic Klein break in fights too, but I want to see if the mental is catching up with the physical, because the physical, boy, is it there. And I do think these last two fights were big steps in the right direction. Couple that with the fact that he's 4-0-1 since he's moved up to lightweight. Could this be the time where he's finally putting it together? So I think he's got a really formidable challenge with Thiago. I think there's places I don't want Ludovic to be, like on his back, of course. Not only on his back, I don't want Thiago on your back. You know, Thiago's very dangerous. But man, I think Ludovic is fast twitch. I think he's starting to get that confidence, feel like he belongs, and like he's about to hit the top 15. And I think that he's a bit faster than Thiago Moises, but there's just certain places you don't want to be with Thiago. So it should be a good fight, but I'm going to go with Ludovic Klein to extend that win streak and possibly find himself in the rankings, if not like one of those top 15 showdowns that gets you in there. Like, let me double check. Is Thiago Moises ranked right now? Because hold on, let me double check that. So Thiago Moises. No, he's not ranked, but Bobby Green is, who he beat. Close fight. Yeah, you know, that there's a couple things in these rankings they need to fix up. Like, there's a lot of guys that are kind of like grandfathered in who did great things in the past, but haven't really earned their keep lately, that might need to be kind of ushered out the rankings. But either way, Thiago Moises is on like the cusp of the rankings. He's still in like top 20, top 25, and Ludovic has to, you know, be right outside of that. So big fight for both guys. We'll go with Ludovic Klein. Now, next up in the welterweight division, we got a matchup between Carlos Prates. He's 18-6, taking on Charles Chuck Buffalo Radke, who's 9-3. Currently, they got it. Carlos Prates minus 230. The comeback on Chuck Buffalo Radke is plus 195. I like this fight a lot. You know, Carlos Prates is a very bright prospect in the welterweight division. He's 6'1" with a 78-inch reach. He knows how to fight long. He's 30 years old, so he's flat out in his prime. And he's a guy that's coming in the UFC with a lot of experience. Makes his UFC debut at 17-6. So there's a guy that already paid his dues. Like, it's not like one of these guys that's coming in like 6-0, or actually like his opponent, Charles Radke, who's only 9-3 right now, who I think Charles Radke is a talented kid. I think that he's been making a lot of progress. I really liked his knockout over Urbina. But I still think that he's kind of, like I said, paying his dues, kind of trying to figure out where he stands in welterweight. And I like a lot of the things he's been doing outside the octagon. Like he was training with Bilal Muhammad and Ignacio, which is going to elevate his game. But I don't think he did for this camp because those guys were out there with Islam and Habib. So I'm not sure if he trained with them this camp. But look, Radke's a physical guy. He does have one punch knockout power. He does have a grappling background. So there's a lot to like about him, but there's a big difference in experience here. And also, Radke is kind of like a meat and potatoes type guy. Like he's just well-rounded everywhere, nothing special anywhere. Whereas Pratchett really shines with his Muay Thai. Dana even compared him to Anderson. And while sometimes you want to be like, hey, hold on a second, when you hear comparisons like that, there are some comparisons, both very long, southpaws, and they're kind of slow starters. But once they start to feel, so they start to get their rhythm going, they start to find their range. These guys do some beautiful violence, man. Like Pratchett has nasty flying knees. He's always measuring his range with his teeps. He's got nasty kicks where you'll start, kicking to your arms a little bit. You start to drop your arms, then you'll go upstairs with high kicks. He can knock guys out with punches, knees, like I said, elbows. Like he's got the full arsenal, and he has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he can be taken down, but he's good at relaxing, like kind of the chill, kill, get his butterfly, hooks in, get back up to his feet. It's just, he might kind of lose the first round in some fights, like kind of like Anderson used to, because he takes his time to ease into the fight. But once he finds his rhythm, he's one of these guys that creates beautiful violence. And I think that this is a perfect opponent for Carlos Pratchett to come out here and get another highlight reel knockout, man. Like I respect Chuck Buffalo a lot, but there's just a big difference in the seasoning and the experience and the dues paid between these two, not to mention the physical advantages and just the straight up skill in the striking department. So yeah, I think that this is a good matchup for Carlos Pratchett. I think he might have to maybe get taken down early and overcome that, or maybe eat a few shots. But once he finds his range, I think you're going to see something beautiful here. So yeah, I'm going Carlos Pratchett, and possibly emphatically. Now, next up in the Bantamweight division, we got a matchup between Brad Katona. He's 13-3, taking on Jesse Butler, who's 12-5. Currently, they got it. Brad Katona minus 625, my friends. The comeback on Jesse Butler is plus 450. So, excuse me. Brad Katona is the last guy I want to trust at minus 625 because he's just kind of like a, play it safe, harmless point guy, and he's getting older. And I will say that the output in that Cody Gibson fight was fantastic, but I do kind of think that, Brad's on a decline. I felt like that last fight against Armfield was a perfect example of that. Credit to Armfield. But a couple of years ago, I think that Katona definitely wins that decision. And here, one thing I want to point out, although Katona's far more skilled, there's a lot of physical advantages Jesse has. Like Jesse's last fight was against Jim Miller at 55s. He's dropping 2 weight classes here to 35s, and we're talking about 5'10 versus 5'6. We're talking about a 64-inch reach versus a 73-inch reach. Like that's a 9-inch reach advantage for Jesse. The issue with Jesse is he's another one of these guys that not the most athletic, kind of like good at beating up, these lower level guys on the regional, but not really sure how it'd pan out at the UFC level. He had a sick knockout over Masio Fullen, but like when you watch some of those exchanges, more seasoned guys are going to actually get the better of Jesse in spots like that. And Masio is a UFC vet, but a guy on his way out. So this is tough because it's like when Brad wins fights, does Brad finish anything? Has Brad? Yeah, people are going to talk about some exhibition match he had with Bryce Mitchell when Bryce was like 17. Like, come on, guys. Like, has he ever done anything inside the UFC that was even close to finishing anything? The answer is no. So, guy that fights on very slim margins at almost minus 700. I'm not saying he's not going to win. He probably does win, but like, this is a dog or pass situation. I just don't trust Jesse Butler. So, it's a pass for me. But like, listen, like I said, he's got things going for him. 9-inch reach advantage. He's dropping 2 weight classes. He's fighting a guy on his way out. So, there is something to like. I just don't think the skills are quite up to par. And I think that Brad Katona, as a minus 700 favorite, is going to weasel by a decision, a minus EV decision. Now, next up in the flyweight division, we got a matchup between Andrea Lee. She's 13-9, taking on Montana De La Rosa, who's 12-9. 13-9 versus 12-9. Should be 12-10 because that one draw Montana had against Myra Bueno Silva. Let's call a spade a spade. She definitely lost that fight. Currently, they got it. Andrea Lee minus 160. The comeback on Montana is plus 140. So I was actually at their first fight. I think it was like in Greenville or something like that. It was the night that Zombie fought Moicano. And Andrea clearly won 30-27, but like Andrea couldn't get up from bottom at all in that fight. But like, man, look at Andrea's look at both of their current runs. Like, none of them can catch a win to save their lives right now. Like, they're both clearly on their way out. It's like, damn, like Andrea's lost 7 of her last 9. And it's pretty similar, story for Montana. Like, they're both on their way out. It's like, is Montana catching her at a good time? She is, but like Montana's never assertive enough in these fights. Like, there's just something missing in that kind of like willingness to go for it. And I think that Andrea, even though she's clearly slowed down, this has to at least feel like a relief that like, hey, you fought competitively with Macy Barber. You don't have to deal with Natalia Silva anymore. It was like, a freak prospect in the division. But like, at what point does Andrea just completely check out? Like, because these losses, one after the next, she's looking slower and slower every fight. But then it's like Montana, have you seen any improvements in her game? I haven't. So yeah, it's unfortunate because I'm not a fan of Lee, but I do think she's a better fighter. So I'll go Andrea Lee via split decision. Now, next up in the Bantamweight division, we got a matchup between Daniel Marcos. He's 15-0, taking on John Castaneda, who's 21-6. Currently, they got it. Daniel Marcos minus 120. The comeback on John Castaneda is plus 100. It just depends where you look. In some spots, it's minus 110 apiece. This is a really good fight. I've been impressed with both. Marcos, I think, is a very cerebral prospect. He had like a long ass layoff from 2019 to 2022. He comes to Contender Series off a 3-year layoff. Looks great. Now, granted, the opponent he fought was, some 5'4" guy with a 64-inch reach, but you treated him like one, and then since then beat the shit out of Simon Oliveira. Then all of a sudden you're fighting fucking Davy Grant, a guy who's got to win over Cheeto Vera, a guy who's paid his dues. And like, people want to get on their high horse and call that fight this big robbery and this and that. But like, yeah, it's a big robbery because you bet Davy Grant and he lost, or is it actually a big robbery? And I don't think it was that big of a robbery. Like, when I watched that fight and you look at the stats and it says that Davy landed 70 significant, Marcos only landed 48. Yeah, bullshit. Listen, here's how I view that fight. Davy threw more strikes, but Davy's strikes were hitting glove, hitting shoulder, and hitting air. Marcos threw less strikes, but Marcos, when he threw that jab, he was landing every single time pretty much. And Davy's kind of an awkward guy to fight. So even though people might view it a certain way, like, watch that fight closely. Davy was missing most of what he was fighting. And even though Danielle was throwing few and far between, when he did throw, he was popping that head back with jabs. So I really didn't have a problem with that decision. And then he looked good in that last fight against Richie Lang, doubled him up. But like, there's certain moments where maybe it's against the fence or whatnot, where I still think Marcos is kind of figuring things out, and rightfully so. He's getting his experience. He's paying his dues, and Castaneda has paid his dues already. Castaneda has been through the ups and the downs. There's things I don't like about Castaneda, but there's things I got to give him credit for. Like, for example, he's battled back from some really tough spots in a lot of fights, and it seems like at one point in his career, he kind of redlined at times, and then like would just have massive like drop-offs in fights. But that Hyung Ho Kang fight, that was a career high output for Castaneda, and it seems like he's mixing up his game. He was able to throw in 3 takedowns in addition to over 100 significant strikes. So I like what I see there. And not to mention, Castaneda does switch his stances, but this is going to be kind of a more southpaw look that Marcos hasn't seen in a while. Now, last time Marcos did see it was like 5 years ago, but Marcos is a young guy. I'm sure he's made tons of improvements. So this is a tough one. I'd say Marcos is the more slick guy here. I'd say that Castaneda is more experienced, probably a bit more well-rounded. It's tough. But I've been picking against Castaneda every fight for a reason, and I'm gonna do it again here too. So I'm gonna go Marcos to kind of just out slick him a little bit and win a close decision. Now, next up in the strawweight division, we got a matchup between Eduarda Moura. She calls herself Ronda. She's taking on Denise Eduarda is 10-0. She's taking on Denise Gomez, who's 8-3. Currently, they got it Eduarda minus 170. The comeback on Denise is plus 145. So it comes down to one thing in my eyes here. You know, Ronda has to come out here and get Denise down. When Denise has lost fights, she's been taken down. It's like a life alert, like, help, I've fallen and can't get up. And that's pretty much the case here with Denise Gomes. Like to put it in perspective, okay? Like the fight she lost against Loma, got taken down 4 times. Against Angela, got taken down 5 times. The fight she's winning, she's not getting taken down. And then with Eduarda, she did hit 3 takedowns on Montserrat Conejo, and that's what she has to do here. She has to get that judo throw, that double leg, whatever the case may be, and she has to hold down Denise Gomez, if not submit her. The thing about Denise is, girl can crack. Like, you don't often see that in the women's divisions. And there's also a big market overcorrection here. Like, she was a favorite over Angela Hill, who is one of the most seasoned fighters in the history of that weight class, like a pioneer of that weight class. And now she's a dog to some chick that only beat that Montserrat Conejo Ruiz girl. Like, I'm not saying stylistically that's not a tough matchup for Denise, but I am saying if she can keep this standing, she's gonna light this girl up. So based off the market and me kind of hoping that she doesn't get exposed on the mat for the millionth time, I'm gonna go Denise here for the upset. Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got a matchup between Cody Stamann, he's 21-6, taking on Taylor Lapillus, who's 19-4. Currently, they got it. Holy shit, Taylor Lapillus minus 275. The comeback on Cody Stamann's plus 225. Yeah, that's kind of interesting because Taylor Lapillus, he's extremely talented. He's a good kickboxer, a good French kickboxer. His takedown defense has gotten a lot better over the years. He's better at getting back up. My issue I've always had with Lapillus, whether it was his first UFC stint up until this stint, is he doesn't I always want more. I'm always like Taylor, throw more, show me more aggression, show me more dog, because the skills are there, the experience is there. There's a lot to like about Taylor Lapillus, but Cody Stamann, this dude is as experienced as they get, and every fight he has, minus against the best of the best, even against some of the best of the best, against Merab, that was a close-ass fight, man. The only times he's getting blown out was against Aljo, former champ, and against fucking Saeed Nurmagomedov, which was just a quick little guillotine. I mean, I guess you could say Jimmy Rivera outclassed him too, but besides that, this dude's having real fights with Song Yadong, got to a draw there with Merab, and even that last fight he lost against Douglas D. Silva, I was there, and in the arena, a lot of us thought that Cody won that fight. And the point I'm trying to make is when you get plus 225 odds on a guy who literally competes with pretty much every single guy he fights, unless you're concluding that Taylor Lapillus is just going to run through him. But the thing about it is Taylor Lapillus doesn't run through anybody. Taylor Lapillus fights close with everybody. So, again, I'm not saying Taylor can't edge out the decision, but I'm saying the winner of this fight is most likely edging out a decision. So why would you want to lay minus 300 in this spot? Someone explain it to me. Unless you just think it's a clear 30-27 or possibly a late stoppage, which I don't see based off Taylor Lapillus' history. Yeah, I'm going to go Cody Stamann via controversial split decision here. I mean, the way these two fight, they always fight on the closest of margins, and the line is almost minus 300. Something's not adding up. Let me know in the comments if y'all think that Taylor Lapillus is gonna fucking have a career best performance and look like someone we've never seen before. Because the Taylor Lapillus I know, very skilled everywhere, but just doesn't do enough. Doesn't go for it like you want him to. And Stamann is great in those kind of fights. Stamann, if you want to have a low output fight with Stamann, He's built a career doing shit like that. So I'm gonna go Cody Stamann here for the upset. Now, last but not least, in the strawweight division, we got a matchup between Rayani Amanda. She's 14-7, taking on Pooja Tomar, who's 8-4. Currently, they got it. Rayani Amanda -300. The comeback on Pooja Tomar is +250. I'll be honest, I didn't look into this fight specifically, but I just want to say, if you told me that a professional fighter from Brazil was getting into a professional fighter from Brazil was getting into a pro MMA fight with a professional fighter from India, 9 times out of 10, I'm taking Brazil over India. Unless, has there ever been an Indian fighter that's beat a Brazilian fighter? I'm sure we'll find some off the wall example, but more often than not, I am confident Brazil beats India in fighting. Probably in soccer too. Yeah, I don't want to bullshit y'all guys and act like, I can break this down in a way where I'm going to give you something you haven't heard before, Yeah, just I got to go with the experience of the Brazilian, the level of competition she's fought, and, especially if she gets it to the mat, she should be good to go. Even in this Pooja girl or whatever is known for her striking. She's been knocked out before, so I'm just yeah. Not trying to be rude, but Brazil over India, period. All right, my friends, we flew through it. So we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So what is the fight to watch for UFC Louisville? There's a couple fights to watch. But you want to know something? I'm going to give you 2 prospects to watch. I'm going to give you Carlos Prates and Ludovic Klein. Those are the 2 fighters to watch. Carlos Prates, if Dana's comparing you to Anderson Silva and you have the kind of finishing prowess that this man has, and you have a much lesser experienced opponent here, I want to see a highlight reel, man. I want to see you, make a statement here to where they're oh, yeah, let's give you some more experienced opponents, because people talk shit about the Trevin Giles fight, but what you gotta understand is Trevin Giles is known for doing well early in fights until he self-implodes. Trevin Giles did good against Dricus, did good against Michael Morales, did good against Carlos until they all starched him. So and Trevin's a seasoned, experienced UFC vet. Charles Radke is not. So look out for Prates and then Ludovic Klein. If you have not taken note of just the improvements and the physique changes these last few fights, I don't know what to say, but this is a step up in competition against Thiago Moises, who's kind of a gatekeeper to the top team, despite being a young veteran. This fight's going to let us know a lot. So Carlos Prates and Ludovic Klein are my fighters to watch. My fights to watch, I'm going to go Puna versus Miguel Baeza, because both guys desperately need to get back on track. And Dominick Reyes versus Dustin Jacoby, man. Is this the end for Dominick Reyes? It might be. It might have been the end a long time ago. And Dustin Jacoby, this will be a big win on his resume. So, yeah, those are my fights to watch. I'm also interested in Bruno Ferreira versus Stoltzfus, too. I want to see if Stoltzfus can get me to the 7-minute mark. So, lots of fights flying under the radar here. So, I'm excited about it. So, guys, thank you all so much for your support. Really appreciate it. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Leave me a comment if you feel so inclined to share. I appreciate that too. Y'all can hit me up on Twitter at Best Fight Picks and at Half the Battle HQ on Twitter, and then Half the Battle Pod on Instagram. And I'm always down to interact with anyone that has my back. So I truly, sincerely appreciate you guys. Enjoy the fights, and until the next time, let's cash these bets.